Chris Norman's reflections on his long career with Smokie reveal a life shaped by music, change, and personal decisions that carried both emotional weight and artistic consequence. His journey is not just the story of a successful band, but also of an individual navigating identity within collective fame. At different points in his career, Norman has spoken about music as something deeply embedded in his life, not merely as a profession but as a constant presence since youth. As he looks back, especially on the decades surrounding Smokie's rise, peak, departure, and aftermath, his perspective blends nostalgia with clarity about the pressures and expectations that came with success. He has often emphasized that the band's story was not a simple rise to fame, but a gradual evolution shaped by years of struggle, creative development, and eventual transformation. Over time, he came to recognize both the achievements and the constraints that defined the Smokie era. This reflection also includes his thoughts on legacy, ownership of a band's identity, and the complex relationship between past success and present artistic freedom. His story ultimately highlights how musicians must reconcile personal growth with public memory, especially when their voice becomes inseparable from a band's identity. Early formation and the beginnings of Smokie. The origins of Smokie trace back to the mid-1960s, when Chris Norman formed the group with school friends, including Alan Silson and Terry Utley. Like many young bands of that era, they started without fame, resources, or industry support, driven mainly by enthusiasm for performing and improving their craft. Before settling on the name Smokie, the group experimented with earlier names and musical directions, gradually shaping their identity through live performances. Their early years were marked by constant experimentation with sound, blending vocal harmonies with a raw, energetic stage presence, influenced by British rock traditions of the time. Unlike the polished pop image they would later become known for, the band initially leaned toward a heavier, guitar-driven style that reflected the live music culture of the 1960s. These formative years were essential in developing the cohesion between members, as they learned to perform tightly synchronized harmonies while maintaining a strong instrumental base. The eventual name change to Smokie was partly a practical decision to avoid confusion with other artists, but it also signaled the beginning of a more defined identity. Though success was still far away, these early years laid the foundation for what would later become an internationally recognized band. Years of struggle, touring, and musical development. Before achieving commercial success, Smokie spent years performing in small venues across the United Kingdom, building experience through relentless touring. The band traveled extensively in a van, carrying equipment, sleeping in cramped conditions, and performing night after night in clubs, pubs, and local halls. These years were financially modest but artistically important, as they allowed the group to refine their sound and strengthen their stage presence. Chris Norman has often described this period as one of intense bonding, where the members functioned almost like a family due to the constant proximity and shared struggles. The repetition of live performances helped them develop tight vocal harmonies and a disciplined musical structure that later became a defining feature of their recordings. While the lifestyle was physically demanding and often uncertain, it also instilled resilience and adaptability. Every performance, regardless of audience size, became an opportunity to improve and survive in a competitive music environment. These formative experiences shaped not only their technical abilities, but also their identity as a working band. Long before international recognition, Smokie was a group defined by persistence, travel, and the determination to succeed despite limited resources and uncertain prospects. Breakthrough, through collaboration and commercial recognition. Smokie's transition from a struggling live band to an internationally recognized act began when they collaborated with the songwriting and production team, Nicky Chin and Mike Chapman. This partnership marked a turning point in their career, introducing a more commercially focused sound that aligned with the popular music trends of the mid-1970s. The release of If You Think You Know How to Love Me in 1975 brought the band significant attention, reaching the UK charts and opening doors to a broader European audience. This was followed by a series of successful singles, including Living Next Door to Alice and Lay Back in the Arms of Someone, which solidified their presence in the international music scene. The songs combined emotional storytelling with strong melodies and vocal harmonies, creating a style that resonated widely with audiences. As their popularity grew, Smokie transitioned from small venues to large concert halls and international tours. Television appearances further amplified their reach, making them regular guests on major music programs. This period transformed the band's identity from regional performers into global pop rock artists. It also established Chris Norman's distinctive voice as a central feature of their success, helping define the sound that would become associated with Smokie's legacy. The height of success and international fame. By the mid to late 1970s, Smokie had reached the peak of their commercial success, becoming one of Europe's most recognizable pop rock bands. Their music dominated charts across multiple countries, including Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Australia, where their albums and singles sold millions of copies. The band's frequent appearances on television programs such as, quote, Top of the Pops, reflected their consistent chart presence and growing popularity. International touring became a major part of their career, with performances in large venues across Europe and beyond. This rapid rise from small-town clubs to global stages marked a dramatic transformation in their professional lives. However, with success came increasing demands, including a relentless schedule of recording sessions, promotional appearances, and live performances. Despite these pressures, the band maintained a strong connection with audiences through their emotionally driven songs and harmonious sound. Chris Norman's vocal style, characterized by its rough yet melodic tone, became a defining feature of their identity. This era established Smokie not only as a commercial success but also as a lasting presence in the European pop rock landscape, with songs that continued to resonate long after their initial release. Musical identity, vocal style, and band harmony. A key element of Smokie's success was the distinctive blend of vocal harmony and instrumental arrangement that defined their sound. Unlike many contemporaries who focused heavily on either guitar-driven rock or studio experimentation, Smokie built their identity around layered vocals and melodic accessibility. Chris Norman's voice played a central role in shaping this identity, with its raspy, emotional tone becoming instantly recognizable to audiences. However, the band consistently emphasized that their strength lay in collective performance rather than individual prominence. The interplay between members created a balanced sound that combined warmth, clarity, and emotional depth. This approach allowed them to stand out in a crowded musical landscape during the 1970s, where trends were rapidly evolving. Their style blended elements of soft rock and glam rock, making their music appealing across different audiences and regions. The harmonies were not only a stylistic choice but also a reflection of their long years performing together in close conditions, where coordination and unity were essential. This musical identity became a defining feature of Smokie's recordings and live performances, contributing significantly to their lasting popularity and recognition. Growing pressures and the beginning of change. Despite their success, the demands placed on Smokie began to take a toll on the band, particularly as touring schedules became increasingly intense. The cycle of recording, promotion, and international travel left little time for rest or creative exploration outside established expectations. Record labels and audiences came to expect a consistent sound, which gradually limited artistic flexibility. For Chris Norman, this period marked the beginning of internal reflection about his future direction. While the commercial formula continued to deliver success, it also created a sense of repetition that affected creative satisfaction. After more than a decade and a half with the band, the structure that had once supported their rise began to feel restrictive. The tension between commercial success and artistic freedom became more pronounced as the years progressed. Although there was no major conflict within the group, the growing sense of limitation influenced Norman's thinking about change. This period represents a transitional phase in Smokie's history, where success and pressure coexisted, ultimately setting the stage for a significant personal decision that would reshape his career path. The decision to leave and personal transformation. In the mid-1980s, after more than 2 decades with Smokie, Chris Norman made the decision to leave the band. This choice was not driven by internal disputes, but rather by a desire for creative independence and personal growth. He has described the decision as one of the most significant risks of his career, as it meant stepping away from a well-established and successful musical identity. At the time, Smokie remained popular, and leaving the group meant abandoning a stable and familiar professional environment. However, the need to explore new artistic directions outweighed the comfort of continued success. The transition was challenging, as Norman had to establish a solo identity separate from the band that had defined his career. He has often reflected on this period as a necessary step in understanding himself as an artist, beyond group expectations. His departure also highlighted a broader theme in music careers: the balance between stability and reinvention. While the decision carried uncertainty, it ultimately opened the door to new opportunities and allowed him to redefine his artistic path on his own terms. Solo career and new artistic direction. Following his departure from Smokie, Chris Norman embarked on a solo career that required rebuilding his musical identity. One of his most significant early successes was the song Midnight Lady, released in 1986, which became a major hit across Europe and reached #1 in Germany. This achievement demonstrated that his appeal extended beyond the band context, and that his distinctive voice remained a powerful connection to audiences. His solo work allowed him to explore different musical styles and themes, offering greater creative freedom than he had experienced in the later years of Smokie. However, the transition also came with challenges, including the need to redefine his public image and establish a sustainable solo presence. Over time, he developed a catalog of work that balanced new material with influences from his earlier career. This period confirmed that while Smokie had shaped his foundation, his artistic identity was not limited to the band. Instead, his solo career became an extension of his musical journey, allowing him to continue evolving while maintaining continuity with his past, live performances, and the continuing legacy of Smokie songs. As Chris Norman's solo career developed, his relationship with Smokie's catalog evolved significantly. In the early stages after leaving the band, he sometimes sought distance from the older material, focusing primarily on new creative output. However, audience expectations gradually influenced his approach to live performances. Many fans who attended his concerts were longtime listeners who associated his voice with Smokie's classic hits. Over time, he began integrating these songs into his solo shows, creating a balance between past and present. This shift reflected a growing acceptance of his musical history rather than a rejection of it. Performing songs like Living Next Door to Alice became less about revisiting pressure-filled years and more about shared experience with audiences. The response from listeners often reinforced the enduring popularity of Smokie's music, which continued to resonate across generations. Today, his performances typically combine solo material with selected Smokie classics, creating a unified musical experience that bridges different phases of his career. This approach highlights how legacy and evolution can coexist within a single artistic identity. Modern Smokie, legacy questions, and final reflection. In recent years, Chris Norman has spoken openly about the modern version of Smokie, particularly after the passing of key original members. The continuation of the band name with entirely new lineups has been a point of concern for him, as he does not maintain any involvement or connection with the current group. From his perspective, Smokie's identity is rooted in the original members who created the sound and recorded the classic songs. He has expressed discomfort with the idea of the band continuing without its founding lineup, viewing it as a separation from the authentic history of the group. At the same time, he acknowledges that the music itself continues to reach new audiences, regardless of who performs it. This situation raises broader questions about ownership, legacy, and the life of musical brands beyond their original creators. For Norman, the legacy of Smokie remains tied to its early years, peak success, and original artistic contributions. His reflections ultimately present a complex picture of fame, memory, and artistic identity, showing how a band's history continues to evolve long after its original formation and success.